Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Kim. She is from a small town originally. She's been in the Navy now for 4 years. Her case opened last year, well, actually 2020 now, when COVID was just starting to happen, and it closed while she was on deployment, and now she is ready to talk about it. Kim, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. So I guess I'll begin my story. Well, it started just before deployment. We were doing a workup cycle, and we were in we got sent to a debt site for workups, and it was just the beginning of COVID. So while we were there for that attachment, there was a lot of confusion of when deployment was starting, a lot of if we should wear masks, what's going on. So a lot of us just wanted to, relax after work and go out to what is called the Thunderdome. And that's what we did all the time. My story in particular started after shift. It was night shift. We got off early, so we were gonna head over to the Thunderdome, and I had a friend of mine, and me and her would take turns, watch over each other. So that night, it was supposed to be her turn while I got to have fun. I wasn't planning on getting too drunk, but I guess I did. And well, everything was going good that night. I had a friend of mine who was leaving the command, and we were talking about good times and bad times, and things got very, emotional. And I was just drinking, just a drink, and I was having a lot of fun. So my girlfriend, she was just like, "Hey, let's when I say girlfriend, it's like my friend." So when she said go back to the room, I was like, "No, maybe you should just stay here and have fun." So really, she was really just trying to get me to go back to the room because I was super intoxicated, and we had this agreement where we would take care of each other. Well, I ended up staying out, and I was an unpacked sailor at the time who just struck a rate. I am an aviation ordnance, and I was getting ready to go into my shop, so I was being treated like family to the other AO shop. And one second class in that shop started coming on to me a little too strong, and I pushed him off me, and he kept coming on to me. So a different AO came up to him and told him he needed to stop and chill. So they got into an altercation, and another AO3 took me away from it with my girlfriend when we all left the party. So we ended up going to the laundry room. I was completely out of it. I just remember holding my girlfriend's hand and walking to the laundry room, and they were giving me water. And we were sitting there, and we're just talking about anything and everything. I remember seeing him rub her feet, and then I remember her telling me, "Hey, I'm about to go to my room. AO3 got you. He said he'll take care of you." And I was like, yeah, sure. I'm good, And I guess he needed to go to the bathroom, so I was like, "My room's right around the corner. You can just go there." And I remember like trying to walk straight, but everything was just like hazy, and I was just trying to go back to my room. So we walked into my room, And he went to the bathroom, and I laid on my bed. The room was really like spinning. And we were talking for a little bit, and he started to come on to me, but I remember telling him like, "No, I don't want to do this. Like, we shouldn't do this." And he would stop, and then I would go out, I would black out again, and I'll come to. And I remember him kept trying to kiss me, but I never let him kiss me. I never let him try to kiss me. I just kept pushing him away, and I kept telling him to stop. Like, I was like, "No." Like, remember I remember he was on top of me taking my clothes off, and I pushed him off and said, "Stop. I don't want to do this." And he backed away, and he's like, "Okay, okay, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And then what I thought was I fell asleep, but I guess I blacked out again, and I woke up to him inside of me, and I started crying. That's when he stopped, and I was just crying in my bed, and he got ready, and he said he was sorry, and he left. The next day, I woke up. I was super hungover, but I was also thinking that what happened was like a nightmare. Like, it didn't happen. I was too drunk. Like, what if I made it up? So I walked over to my girlfriend's room, and I didn't really want to tell her. I didn't really want to tell anyone, actually. I was just kind of questioning myself what happened, because I never thought that I would let something like that happen to me, or especially with that person, because I really trusted him. I thought he was a friend of mine. And I thought, when you say no to a person, it means no, but I'm not in that situation, I guess. When I walked over to my friend's room, we were getting ready to leave back to our home station from our debt site, and I told her what happened, and she got really mad. It wasn't she got really mad, and she cried a little bit. We both cried. So um, she was like, "That's rape. That's rape." Like, she just kept saying the R word, and I was just like, "No, no, like, it's not bad. Like, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe." And she was just like, "No, like, we're going to the commissary. We're gonna get you a plan B. We're gonna go right now." So we walked to the commissary, and we got a plan B, and I took it, and I had to ride on a plane ride all the way home with that second class who harassed me that night, and the third class, both AOs. And me being a new AO, I had to go into that shop. So my friend of mine told me that I needed to report it, but I was just telling her, like, "No, like, it's nothing. I'm not gonna do it. Like, I don't think it's a big deal." And it took a week for me to wrap my head around it. During that week, I was really just questioning if it was real, like, if it's rape, if it if it actually happened, or of course it happened. Like, why wouldn't it happen? Like, and should I keep my mouth shut about it? And I remember calling my sister, who she was in the Marine Corps. She got out years before I joined, but I remember calling her, and I told her about what happened. And I told her that I was just going to go through with this boat deployment. And she got upset with me. She said that a friend of her, while she was in the service, had the same thing happen to her. And she went on that boat with that Marine, and it destroyed her mentally. And she didn't want the same to happen to me. So we talked about it, but I just still couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, it was really fresh. I was in denial. I blamed myself for it because it was my actions. I got drunk, I trusted people, and like I was beating myself up over it. It wasn't until I finally went into the AO shop, I didn't feel welcomed. I felt extremely uncomfortable. I've been in this command for 2 years, and I worked my I worked my ass off to get to where I was, and a lot of people, respected me, respected my work ethics, and that's, you know, I was going into just stay in that command with this new shop with my new rate. But when I walked in my new shop, it felt so uncomfortable. I would see the second class that harassed me that night, and I would just feel this disgusting feeling in my stomach. And I would always put my head down low. And sometimes I would sit there, my eyes would water up with tears, but I would just walk off to the bathroom. I was so terrified of seeing the AO3 because I haven't seen them since we came back from the detachment. Like I said, COVID was happening during that time. So we were gearing up to leave for the boat months before we had to. And we were in this weird isolation phase where we had to isolate, but we still worked. And we weren't allowed to see night shift, and night shift wasn't allowed to see day check. So there would be a 1 hour gap, which is why I haven't seen him in a while. But I would see his cranial, I would see his name on the board, and all of our coworkers and friends would talk about him. I'd hear his name, and it really, really bugged me. So I would go home and I went to drinking. I would drink just to numb everything out. Finally, I don't know, one day I couldn't do it. I was on the flight line and we were doing like a FOD walk down, and like I was walking there, and man, that FOD walk down really makes you question a lot of things because it's just such a long, long walk for some reason. But I was just thinking so much, and I walked up to, at the time he was a chief, and he was my favorite. Um, so I walked up to him and I asked him, I was like, "Hey, chief, like who's in charge of the SAPR program?" He looked at me, he's like, "Why? Like, are you want to join?" I was like, "No, I was just asking for a friend." He's like, "Oh, it's a PO2." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Is it in this command?" And then I was like, "No, no, I was just, having some questions about the program." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And he walked off, and I knew the petty officer, second class. He was a really nice guy. And I went and I found him, and I was like, "Hey, can I talk to you real quick?" He's like, "Yeah." And we walked outside, and I was like, it's a serious talk. And he's like, "Okay, we can go somewhere private." So we went somewhere private, and he's like, "What's going on? What's up?" And I was just like, I really want some information about restricted and unrestricted. And he looked at me, and he's just like, "Okay, this is what's going to happen." And he's like, "Did it happen to you?" And I was like, "Yes." So he asked me if I wanted to file unrestricted or restricted. And he said, before I answer that question, he wanted me to make sure that this is the route we're going to take if I do unrestricted. He said, and he warned me in the beginning, it's going to be a very hard journey, but he will always be there for me. So I was freaking out about it. And he told me to go home and think about it. So I left early for work that day, and I went home and I really thought about it. So I called him and I said, I want to do unrestricted. And he's like, "All right." He's like, "So with COVID happening, we can't go over to Fleet and Family. We can't do this. We can't do that." There's a lot of can'ts. He's like, "This is not normal, but we're going to try." So it was a lot of phone calls and a lot of phone conversations that I had to do over the phone. And when you do a lot of things over the phone, you don't really have that like feeling, I feel like feeling protected. It's just more like, it's just like there's no feeling there. You're just literally talking the talk. And um, so when I walked into work, we had to go um, talk to the investigators, but because of COVID happening, we had to jump through hoops of how we were going to go about it because it was one of the first cases that happened in the start of COVID, is what I was told. The process of it was super long and it was mentally draining. They asked me if I wanted an expedite transfer, and at that time, I was so angry. I was like, no, I don't want an expedite transfer. I want him out of here. Like, I could do this. I could go on this deployment. No, like, I don't want him to ruin this for me. And everyone's just kind of like, are you sure? Like, I was like, no, I really want this deployment. I've worked so hard to get where I was, and I didn't want this one person to ruin it for me. Little did I know, it was probably one of the worst decisions I made. I I left for the deployment 2020. We were on the boat, and one of the worst places to be when you're struggling mentally is on the boat. And I just worked through how I felt. And, when you file unrestricted, there's always a fear of people finding out what happened and taking sides. And, I got, I wouldn't say backlash about it. My command was pretty good at, shutting that down. But there was friends of his that knew, and it showed when they talked to me. And there was rumors going on, but like I said, my command pretty shut it all down. Um, how I coped on the boat was I used to write poems. I wrote a lot, and it things just started getting worse for me. I couldn't concentrate. I could barely sleep. I would put a fake smile on my face and act like nothing was wrong, but every time I was alone, I would always tear up or I would think about him because every time I turned a different corner or every time I looked somewhere, I'd see him. I would remember what happened. I'd remember everything about what happened, and I was just going through it. At the same time, I was trying to focus on this deployment. I was trying to focus on getting my quals and being an AO because that was my new job. But everything just seemed out of focus for me. And I would find myself always going up to the second class and crying. I would always cry. I would always break down in front of him. And he'd always give me the choice. He's just like, you could always expedite out of this. You could always go home and get help. And I was just like, no, 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 no. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I got this. I could do this. And it was like one of the weirdest things always done, is I always focused so much on work, thinking that I could numb everything. And I was so mad at that. I would always tell my second class, like, he took this, he's taken this. I don't want him to take my deployment. I don't want him to take anything else. And there's one thing that he said to me sorry. There's one thing that he said to me that stuck with me. He told me, don't think of it as taken. He's like, you're being delayed, not taken. That's it. You're delayed right now. It's okay to be delayed. It's not taken from you. And I was so mad that he said that. I even like wrote a poem about how mad I was about it. And it's like my body felt different and my emotions were intensified. And I would always lie to myself, like, did it happen? Did it really happen? Did I want it to happen? And I didn't know what he meant by delayed. To me, like, delayed meant that I was being like, I just didn't know. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around what he meant at the time. I was just so focused on like the taking. Like, I was so focused on this AO3 taking everything I worked hard for. And like, I never felt so scared in my life. I never felt so unsettled, so unstable, and my emotions were wired. I was so depressed and I was so full of anger. I was so angry at everything. And I was so angry at the Navy. I was so angry at my command. I was so angry at people. I don't even know why I was angry at people. I was just angry at everyone. And I remember one day, and this is like, I'm not really proud of this day, but I was on a flight deck and the sun was setting, and I was standing by the jet in front of the bow because they would line up all the jets. And I remember just standing there waiting for night flights to start. And I was just looking out in the sun, and I looked down at the water. I remember the waves crashing. I remember the smell of everything going on. But that water looked so warm, so welcoming. And I just wanted to disappear. And I wanted to jump because I was so tired of trying to force myself to work through this pain. And I'm not proud of it thinking about it, but my AO1, little does he know, he saved my life that day. Yeah, I was too busy staring off. He yelled my name. He got mad at me because like I was just standing there, I wasn't working, but it snapped me back into reality. And I looked at him and I told him, I can't be on this deck right now. I can't be on this flight anymore. Like, I can't do this. And he's just like, okay, like, you can take a moment. I was just like, no, I can't do this. Like, I can't be up there. I don't trust myself. And he didn't understand what was going on. And I completely broke down in front of him. I told him everything that happened. And he found the second class that was working with me on my case, and I was crying to him. And we went to my chief, and I broke down and cried in front of him too. It was just like I was one big wreck. They took me to the psych to talk to them for counseling. Uh, the guy I met, he was horrible. I'm not saying like that. It just felt like he didn't really care. It just felt like I was just another sailor who didn't want to be on a boat. And it it was just horrible. So I stopped seeing him and I went to a civilian on the boat. And she said that I was worse off on the boat than I needed to get back on land. And like I was just like, no, you know, I just want to go through this deployment, and so adamant on wanting to go through this deployment because I just didn't want to feel like a failure. Um, all this took about a month, and I finally made the decision to leave to get an expedited transfer. So I did. And leaving that command was hard for me because I had developed so many good friendships there. I had built myself and I worked really hard to get everything. And I had to leave it. And I felt like a failure because like I couldn't stay with them for this deployment. And I felt like I failed myself because I felt like I wasn't strong enough. I could have did it, but would it be worth it? And when I left, I got sent to another command, a different platform than what I was used to. They never go on the boat, so that was a plus. And my time my time back, um, I had a boyfriend at the time, but I honestly was so out of it that I forced myself to stay in that relationship because I felt so unwanted. And that relationship was just horrible, but I still stayed with it because I was just like, I deserved it. I stayed with friends that I knew were bad for me because I felt like I deserved to be in that place. And when I came home, I told everyone I was doing better, I was fine. I know when you deliver bad news and they're on the boat, it doesn't do well. So I never told them the truth. I was more worse off than when they left me. I got into drinking bad. And when I checked into this new command, I was overweight. I hated everyone. I didn't even get a chance to know everyone. And they were leaving for deployment. So I still got my deployment. I left for deployment. And during this whole time, I would have my case, and it would be uh, with my new commander. My last command, I wanted my second class to be there for me, but being that he's on the boat, it was hard for him to be my advocate. So I bounced around with different advocates through the STAR program, but I never really was able to like be comfortable enough to tell him. I've always had to retell my story over and over again through different counselors, different people on phones, calls that I didn't even know because of COVID. I wasn't allowed to go to the office. Everything was through phone calls. And it was always a different person. And I would have to retell my story over and over again. And it got to the point where I just said, fuck it. I can't do this anymore. Like, if you guys can't help me, then like I was like I blamed everything on the Navy. I blamed everything on everyone because I was just like, hey, you can't help me, like then no one will. Like I was just so mad. So when I got checked into this new command, I never really gave it a chance, honestly. Then I can say that. Like I never really tried to develop a friendship. I was still angry about everything and the deployment that I just came like I went on. I I was alone for majority of it because I just didn't feel like making friendships with anyone. I just didn't feel close and I really didn't trust anyone. I didn't really care about falls. I didn't really care about being an AO anymore. I just didn't care. All I cared about was going home and drinking and then going to sleep to forget about everything. I had nightmares every night. I couldn't sleep, and I had suicide ideations all the time. I felt alone, so alone. And I don't know. I met a friend in that command, and I would say he was one who kind of pried open my little hard shell that I made, and we were good friends through the end of deployment. And through him, I met a lot of different other people, and um, but he would be the main one I would hang out with because for the first time, I actually trusted someone, and I was talking to him, and we would laugh, but at the same time, I was still going through a lot. I was very broken. Um, so when my deployment ended, you know, we came home. It was so easy to live life out there because you're in a whole different country. Like, you forget about all your problems back here. But when I came home, I realized that I couldn't even go to the store by myself because I had this fear of running into him because he's still in the same duty station as I am. And our duty station is super small, like really, really small. Everything is like 10 minutes away from each other. So the running into him was always slim to none. And I was so scared of going to the store by myself. I would have friends go there for me, or I just wouldn't go there at all and I would run out of stuff. I would be scared to go to the gas station. Thank God for DoorDash, but it costs a lot. Um, just handling life daily was hard for me. I would still have nightmares a lot. Um, and I would always mask how I felt. I always try to be the bubbly, hyperactive person, and everyone wouldn't see it, but it showed a lot in my work. It showed a lot with people who really, really got to know me. I was always sleeping a lot during the day, but at night I would stay up. My sleep schedule was really weird. Um, Eating was kind of like a chore for me. I would force myself to eat, but I would always feel nauseous and I would throw it up all the time. And I don't I never really tried to get help. I'd think about it, I'll flirt with the idea of going to counseling. I'll flirt with the idea, but I was just like, no, what I'm doing is fine. Like, everything's fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. It happened a year ago. I'm good. But when his name would come up, or I hear his name, I would shut down. And if I saw his friends, I'd shut down. And I just couldn't live like that. Like, I don't think anyone can. And it was it was hard. It was hard for me to build a relationship with someone. It was hard for me to open up to anyone, to be so vulnerable, you know. Um, I got worse, and I didn't realize how worse I gotten until in my last command. I was in this beautiful place on Earth for a detachment. But weeks prior to that, I was already going through a downward spiral. I was feeling depressed. I was feeling alone. And I went on this detachment. I just wasn't talking into anyone. I wasn't trying to hang out with anyone. If I was, I kept my distance. When I drank, I really had no control over it. So I tried to stay away from it. Um, One day I just snapped on that when I got really drunk and I started talking about suicide. And I talked about it to my AO2, who at the time was a really close friend of mine. And she did the right thing. She took me to our first class and our senior, and I kept that secret of me being unrestricted and expedited to this new command. I didn't tell anyone about what happened to me because I wanted a fresh start, but holding all that in, keeping a secret, it really, really drains you. And I broke down. So I got sent to a psych hospital for 3 days for it was more like a suicide watch uh, hold, and I was there for a good while until the command could figure out how to send me back home. And I did um, I did eventually fly home. Um, I self-inflicted, so I had to hide up my my wounds, I guess. And I came home and I was scared, I was embarrassed because I was just like, everyone's gonna know, like, but everyone was pretty casual about it. My higher ups, they just wanted the best for me. So when I got home, everything was pretty much set up for me to go to counseling, um, behavioral health. Um, and my flight doctor was more than happy to take time out of his day to make sure I was okay, even if I just needed to vent. My senior, my gunner, they made sure I was okay, and we were main priority was making sure I was okay, really. So um, I would go to these meetings with this girl, and man, it was so hard. It was so hard because like I never opened up about it, like I'm sorry, I'm crying now, like just thinking about it is really hard. But when I first saw my first session, like I cried. It was weird. I couldn't even talk. I just cried. And like it was the first time that I was getting help. And we start talking about limdo, and limdo is limited duty, but I was kind of like, no, like I don't want to do that. Like I don't want, I just want to get ready for my next deployment. I want to go on deployment with this command. Like, and she looked at me, and I remember her saying is like, because you do realize you're going to do the same thing you did. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I feel like, this counseling, like these meetings are helping me, but, I can get ready for this upcoming deployment because I really want to go. And she looked at me and she's just like, I'm just going to give you this option. You should think about it. Really think about it. If you go on this deployment, what is it going to do for your mental health? She goes, because look at you where you are now. And I was just kind of like, yeah, like I'm okay. I'm talking to you. Like I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Like I was just trying to like making in my head saying that I'm fine and I can do this. I can go on this deployment again. I can do this. It wasn't that hard last time. So it took it took convincing, not just from her, my counselor, but for me as well. And I really thought about it. I just I don't know. I was so scared. Like I was scared of going on Limdo. I was scared of making that choice because I was more scared of feeling like a failure again, and I really wanted to go on deployment again. But I made the choice to go to Limdo. I made the choice to make sure I was okay because a year ago I wasn't okay. I was I was not okay. I was worse. And I thought this whole time that I was getting better, but instead I was pushing so much of it back, and I was trying to focus on other things than to actually deal with it, to actually process everything happening to me. And I was so focused on just trying to work and distract my mind from it that I didn't realize I developed a drinking problem. I didn't realize I created toxic relationships with not just like, intimate, but friendships as well. And a lot of that kept wearing me down. So when I left to go Limdu, yeah, it sucked. It sucked because well, it really sucked. I mean, for me, it sucked because I felt like I was a failure, but I'm not. I just decided to get help because I was tired of it. And I was tired of feeling sad, and I was tired of having no control of my life. And my Limdu's, I'm still a Limdu now, but it's ending, and I'm getting ready to go back out to the fleet. I have uh, actually stopped, drinking so much. I don't really do it as often as I did, and I don't hang out with a lot of people that I used to because they weren't good for me. Not like they just weren't good for me mentally. Um, and like through the counseling that I've been going through, I feel like I'm able to breathe again, and I feel like I'm starting to my mind is starting to clear up, and I'm starting to think straight again. I'm starting to, actually be opened up to new things and trying to create hobbies, and I am laughing more. I'm I have a lot of fun going to work. And I actually look forward to going to work, not just to force myself to forget everything, but because of the people there that I enjoy having, conversations with. But I'm not scared anymore. And I did run into the AO2 that harassed me that night. I still do sometimes. And a part of me, gets angry about it and be like, yeah, I should report it you too. But a part of me is just like, you know what you did. And it shows because when he sees me, he looks a different direction and walks off. And it's just like, it's not my part to say anymore. I'm dealing with my skill. As for the AO3, um, I have not seen him since it happened. I probably saw a glimpse of him, you know, over the last 2 years, like driving by or off in the distance, but I don't I don't know what happened to him. My case closed during my deployment, and he got off with a page 13. Um, and for me, it felt like I was I was just angry. It felt like a slap in the face to me, and I felt like I was so mad at the Navy. I was so mad at how like this was treated, but now I'm just more focused on healing. I still have a long journey to go on, but I feel like I'm a lot better than I was before. My mental health is a lot better, and it's it's been a long, long, long road. Um, my scars are healed, and I'm able to talk about it. Yeah, I still cry when I talk about it. It's a really big thing, but I think more importantly, I'm able to forgive myself because I was horrible to myself about it. Um, and I don't know, like it was it was it was horrible what I did to myself, but I'm making a change now, and you know, counseling, getting help, asking for help instead of hiding it goes a long way for it. So that's my story. It's a very long one. Sorry, I cried. um,
You do not have to apologize for crying at all. I have so much gratitude to you for sharing your story and for being comfortable enough to share on such a public platform. I know I can relate to a lot of what you said, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners can relate to so much of what you said too. But I want to first say that I'm so incredibly grateful that you're still here, and that you are willing to be vulnerable enough to share that part of your life with us. So thank you. Um, I want to ask you a question, and you don't have to answer it if you're not comfortable with it. But the reason I'm going to ask this question is because something that I hear constantly from higher ups and leadership in the military, and I know even like reading articles about like talks from like way higher ups in the military about mental health, is they talk about how the resources are there, but people aren't utilizing the resources. And so I'm curious if you even know why you were so uncomfortable asking to get help when you were struggling so much.
uh, yeah, that's a great question. So I just want to say that um, both of my leadership from the first command to my second command were handled my case, handled how I went like professionally and personal. They always made sure that these resources were there. They always were open with communicating like how I felt. And for me, like I can't speak for everyone, but I'm very thankful to, my COs, my XO, my CMCs, and every leadership that helped me to get to where I was. It, they did explain the programs to me. They basically, held my hand through everything. Um, but it was just more of me denying it because had this mindset that I had this mindset in my head about is kind of embarrassing to say, but that just because I'm a female and this happened to me, then, it shows a weakness. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to come off as weak, or here's another sailor using an excuse to get off the boat, or here's another female, crying wolf. I just didn't want that stereotype. And that was what really held me back on a lot of it. Um, but all the programs that I went through, uh, like SAR, the Fleet and Family, um, the military one source, all that was given to me, full detail of how to go about it. One of my first class actually said she'd, hold my hand through every session if I wanted to. Um, but and I don't know if I answer your question on that.
Yeah, you did. I mean, I know it's different for every single person and why they don't choose to get help, but one of the goals of this podcast is to provide solutions. And so I think that part of that is just getting a deeper understanding into why you feel the way you feel. Because on one hand, yeah, we can provide resources all day, but if people aren't comfortable approaching someone for help or utilizing those resources, then those resources are basically useless. So I appreciate you answering that. That actually helps a lot. Um, what do you think would have been more helpful for you at that time, if anything?
I think would have been more helpful for me would be having um, a female. So my first command, they're all males that handled my case, and being one that my being like, I guess, betrayed by a male, I was just more like anti-male. Like, I don't want anything to do with guys. Like, you guys are all the same type vibe. My second command, all my upper class, well, majority of my upper class were female. So it was super easy for me to open up to them. Could be vulnerable around them. As to where a male, it was hard for me. And I still run into that issue now. Um, it's hard for me to talk to a higher up that's a male. Um, I kind of feel like a my tail's tucked between my legs, and I'm scared, and I don't like. I mean, it's I guess PTSD is what they call it, but I get nervous around it, and I have to be completely comfortable with a male supervisor for me to open up, or for me just to talk to them, because if I don't feel comfortable, I'm not going to approach you. I'm just going to walk away. To where female, I'm more comfortable. Um, but I guess it's just kind of like I'm more comfortable with females than I am with males with my higher ups.
So, what is your overall opinion on the actual SAPR program? Do you think that it was something that was helpful for you, or do you think that the whole program itself could use, I don't want to say like an entire overhaul, unless that's your opinion too, but do you think that there's things that could be improved about the program? And then, second, on that question, were you ever offered a female SAPR advocate, or was it just this is your advocate and this is a male and that's it?
So let's see here. My first impressions with the Stafford program, or we know Fleet and Family and everything, was all phone calls because of COVID. So I can't like 100% say like, yeah, because how my case was handled was just a shit show. It was just a shit show because of COVID. There's no one had no way to do things. Everything was shut down, and it was just purely phone calls. I did have females as advocates, But like I said, being that it was over the phone, I had to retell my story over and over again. And, um, that's one thing. And I think I, can speak for myself when I say this, but I don't really want to retell my story over and over and over again to different people. Um, but I think uh, er- I just didn't understand. Like, you have advocates, and you could call them whenever, but it was just sometimes I would like my situation was just phone calls, so it never felt personal. It always felt like I was just talking on the phone to someone, and they like literally put their cell on mute, and I was just talking to talk, and it was just never feeling like. So I don't know if that changed. I didn't go back to the SAPR program afterwards, with my second command. I just went straight into Fleet and Family. Um, that counseling was weird for me. I didn't like how it was business-like. I didn't like how it wasn't personal, like, personal communication. It was just more business-like, and I guess that was very, off-putting to me. And being that you have a story or, something traumatic happened to you and you're trying to get help for it, like, like a little sympathy goes a long way, Like, you don't have to hug me, but you can, try to sympathize what I'm going through instead of treat me like I'm just another person, or I'm just someone here that's crying over something that doesn't interest you. And that was what it felt like for me.
So if you were to go back, would you still file an unrestricted report?
Um, you know what? If I could go back, I definitely would. I would also put a report on that second class too. Um, because honestly, I think that if it happened to you, you should definitely report it. You can go unrestricted or restricted, but definitely report it for yourself, really. Um, I would definitely do it all over again. The journey was hard, the case was hard, going through everything was hard, but damn, does it feel good now. I don't I don't have to think about what if I did do it or what if I didn't do it. Like I did it and I reported him. Yeah, it took a toll out of me. It mentally, spiritually, physically, but I stood up for myself because I knew it was wrong, and I would do it again.
I love that. That's awesome. So with your counseling now, what is different this time around? I know you mentioned that your counselor has been really helpful for you this time around, but I know you also mentioned some really bad experiences in the past with psych. I believe you said on the boat. What's different this time around for you?
So the difference this time around for me is me actually wanting to get the help. The first time I wasn't trying, I was just dealing with all the emotions, but I was trying to fight to stay on. And this time around, like with my new counselor, she's fabulous. She's absolutely amazing, and she definitely gives me a lot of insights of how I can deal with my emotions and how I deal with different things. But um, it's also 50-50. She can give me the tools, but I'm the one who has to use those tools and build myself back up again. And I think the first time around, they were giving me the tools. They're trying to, but I just wouldn't budge. I wouldn't pick it up. I wouldn't try because I think I shut myself down so much then than now. Um, my counselor now, she did say that I have changed from the first session to now. The first session, like she said, I couldn't even talk about what happened. I could barely get 2 words in without crying. Or sometimes we'd sit in silence. Like we'd sit in silence for our sessions for an hour and a half because I just didn't feel like talking. But she was always so patient with me. Like she didn't care if I ate up her time, even though we didn't talk. It was weird that someone actually really did care about how I felt. And I guess that was so easy for me to open up to her. Back then it was just more like we only got time for 30 minutes. After that, like you gotta go. And the next sailor would walk in. It was just always business like. It was never like personal, or it was always like go, 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 high five. And I couldn't do it. Um, but now it's like going through Limdu, going through these, appointments that I have and working with the people I work with, it gets easier because I use those tools that she's given me. I use the advice she's given me. I read those books she wants me to read. And like I said, it's 50-50 both ways. If you want help, you use tools that they give you. And trust me, she was not my first counselor here. She is actually my third. The first one was a girl. I didn't like her. I requested another one. Next one was a guy, and we know how that goes. So I requested a next one. You have choices with counselors. If you don't like them, if you don't feel comfortable with them, then move on to the next. Like literally pick who you're comfortable with. And that's what I did. I put my foot down. And I was like, no, I want another counselor. And I found her, and she's been amazing throughout this whole journey with me. She's the one who actually encouraged me to talk about during this podcast, because I told her about it a few months ago before I felt ready. At the time, I was like, I'm ready to do it. And she was just like, and then a few weeks later, I was like, yeah, I didn't do it. I got scared. She just laughed and told me, it's okay. Like, if you really want to do it, we'll work you up to it. So, yeah.
She's on base, right?
Yeah, she's on base. She works at the behavioral health, which I go to. I used to go to Fleet and Family Counseling. They have a program for suicide. It's like I don't know, I forgot what it's called, but it's a program you go through, and that's another counselor. That counselor was a guy. Unfortunately for me, is only dudes there, so I found the one, I guess, less intimidating. If he hears this, I'm sorry. But um, and I talked to him about how I felt. It was mainly about, depression and suicide, but he helped me through it. And he would work with my counselor over at Behavior Health, and they would communicate about each session, about how I felt. And when I would be done with his session, the next day I would go over to Behavior Health. We talk a little bit about, the suicide ideations, but more specifically, me and her only talk about the sexual trauma, the PTSD, depression, the anxiety I had. We focus more on that. But I actually finished up my program with Fleet and Family, so I'm all at behavior health right now.
Well, it is actually extremely refreshing to hear that you found someone on base in behavioral health that is really, really working well for you. And so that makes my heart so happy to hear. And Kim, I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your story. And I'm so glad that you're getting the help that you need now. And I hope that you just continue to go on the upward spiral and thrive throughout the rest of your time in the Navy or whatever it is that you do in your life. But you have my utmost gratitude and thank you.
Thank you for having me talk about my story, and I really hope what I say is helpful to other people. I just say that don't be afraid to seek help. There are resources out there. It really is, and if you use them, it does wonders for you. And you can also do civilian therapy too, not just the military. But thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.